you're go for landing, over.
Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet.
July 20th, 1969. Astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first men to land on the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Just like aliens visiting from another world. It had been the stuff of science fiction. Now, everything that could be imagined seemed possible. If mankind could travel the skies and go to other planets, why couldn't beings from other planets visit the Earth? Amidst a wave of modern UFO sightings, a new theory emerged that aliens visited Earth in antiquity and were regarded as gods. But if that were true, wouldn't there be proof? Perhaps there was. All we needed to do was open our eyes and our imaginations. The proof, perhaps, was all around us. In May of 2008, a startling proclamation was issued by the Vatican. For the first time in its 2,000-year history, the Catholic Church acknowledged the possibility that intelligent life could exist on other planets, and that a belief in extraterrestrials did not contradict a belief in God.
Which means, of course, that we are now entering an age in which the universe is beginning to be conceived in different ways from what it was before. And if it is a reality for us, why could it not have been a reality for other beings in the universe who could have visited our Earth and perhaps guided culture in ancient times?
But just what sparked this sudden turnaround in religious thought? Could the Church have been influenced by recent scientific discoveries? In 2002, the Mars Odyssey spacecraft detected enormous reservoirs of ice beneath the Martian surface. The presence of ice and the possibility of water suggested that life could be sustained or even generated on another planet. After decades of orbiting space shuttles and robotic rovers, the idea of sending man back into space, to Mars and beyond, ignited the imagination and brought back the notion that mankind and alien beings had crossed paths before. In 1968, just 1 year before Neil Armstrong's epic spaceflight, a book was published that forever changed the way many in the scientific, religious, and creative communities would view their home planet. Written by Swiss author Erich von Däniken, Chariots of the Gods attempted to prove that alien explorers had visited the Earth thousands of years ago.
When I was a young man, I was educated as a strict Catholic in a boarding school. And there we had to make translations of part of the Bible, Greek to Latin, Latin to German. For example, in the first book of Moses, before the Lord descends on the holy mountain, Moses was ordered to construct a gate around the mountain, otherwise the Israelites would be damaged. I was shocked. I said, this is impossible. My God, he would never use first a gate to protect himself or to protect the Israelites. What are they talking about? And now the work started. I started to read thousands of pages of the beginning of religions, of every mythology. It's always the same story. Of course, with different names, with different heroes. Somebody descends from the sky to the humans. Our forefathers could not understand it. They believed that these are some gods. I was shocked. I asked the question, were primitive human influenced by extraterrestrials, not gods? And if it all was like I suggested, where is the proof? So you start trying to find at least indications. That's what I have done now for at least 45 years. You have pictorial evidence, you have artifacts in archaeology, and you have what's come out of the old literature. Hundreds of indications which you cannot deny anymore.
What it means is that we need new explanations for human origins, that perhaps we're not alone in the universe, and that human-like beings came to this planet from some other planet elsewhere in the cosmos. I think that's a very good idea myself.
And it really excited people. It was a new way of looking at the past, looking at ancient civilizations, and it put this very modern space-age spin to the whole thing.
Chariots of the Gods caused a sensation, fueled in no small part by the popular response to books like Frank Herbert's Dune, television shows like Star Trek, and feature films like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
The time was right because everybody was talking of possible space travel, of possibility of extraterrestrials. So it was all wonderful coming together, but it was not planned.
After a Swiss newspaper printed excerpts of it on a weekly basis, more than 10,000 copies of the book were sold before ever hitting the market.
So it was a running bestseller, starting in Switzerland first, then going over to Germany, and then the rest of the world. They had to print and print and print and print. It was absolutely incredible.
In 1970, a feature-length documentary was released to theaters, followed by dozens of best-selling books and growing legions of fans and supporters.
Chariots of the Gods was tremendously influential. It somehow spoke to people who want to believe.
When I was a boy, Chariot of the Gods was one of the books I first read. I mean, I ripped it apart. I digested it. I couldn't get enough of it.
I just fell in love with that book because it really opened up all kinds of new questions. And von Däniken was able to point out many anomalies in history that the mainstream archaeologists can't answer very well. He had what was a revolutionary new idea, that of gods from outer space coming to the planet, helping create civilization.
When I first read Chariots of the Gods, I couldn't put that book down because it answered a whole bunch of questions that I had, and it was a great combination of archaeology and adventure. And it's just a wonderful way to see the world and pursue these ancient mysteries.
And it truly was, I think, the catalyst for what people like I do today, and that is to talk about the mysteries and the unusual and the paranormal. He paved the way for a lot of us to talk about these strange stories, and that continues to grow, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. People want answers to questions that they can't answer themselves.
But in spite of the book's enormous popularity, or perhaps because of it, von Däniken's theories were scorned by scientists and jeered at by theologians.
Of course, it created a storm of controversy. I was completely attacked, especially by the scientific newspapers. They said, come on, he's just telling story, he's a liar, or he's a fraud, or whatever.
There is not a single piece of evidence that von Däniken puts forward that cannot be attributed to human ingenuity, technology, and development.
Don't try to reduce the scriptures to a science book, or don't try to reduce the scriptures to an explanation of our modern world today.
I don't expect that the scientific community now embraces and kisses me and say, oh, wonderful, great you did. We have to live with critics. This is normal. Chariots of the God was full of speculation. I had 238 question marks. Nobody read the question mark. They always said, Mr. von Däniken is saying. I did not say. I asked the question, would that be a possibility? That in Chariots of the Gods, I made clear differences between speculations and facts.
But as controversial as many of von Däniken's theories are, believers point to tangible evidence. How, for example, could a centuries-old map chart a landmass that has only recently been discovered?
It would tend to indicate that the map was made at a time when Antarctica was ice-free, which would be many millions of years ago.
And how could a primitive civilization know how to harness electricity or even build a computer?
This was tantamount to finding a jet airplane in the tomb of King Tut.
And just who were these mysterious designs, only visible from high altitudes, intended for?
The signs are made for somebody who flies. There's no way out of this.
Could von Daniken's theory that ancient gods were really alien visitors contain any serious scientific merit? The answer involves a search around the world, and even right before our eyes. If alien beings from other planets had visited the Earth thousands of years ago, how would our ancient ancestors have tried to communicate with them? And wouldn't there be some physical evidence of the time they spent here? One answer may lie in the Nazca Desert of Peru. There, atop an arid plateau that stretches for nearly 50 miles, countless geometric patterns and figures decorate the landscape.
You fly over this desert and you see some lines. The lines look like airstrips. They start abruptly, they end abruptly. The longest of it is 23 kilometers, right away, not one curve, just incredible, and ending in one of these so-called airstrips. In the mixture of large lines and small lines, you see gigantic figures in the ground. Figures of fishes, monkeys, spiders, apes, but of such overdimensional size that you can see them only from the air.
People built them, or somebody built them, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, perhaps maybe even thousands of years ago. That could be signs of, hello up there, here we are, it's something.
Various disputed explanations suggest that the lines could have been used for irrigation ditches, giant astronomical calendars, or pathways, perhaps used for religious worship.
Looking at Nazca from the air, it looks like an airport. And it really does, because you have all these bands, wide bands, that look like airstrips that are laid on top of each other, but you also have these gigantic, long, straight lines that go for miles and miles over valleys, over mountains.
So once again, you've got this idea of like, okay, people are creating this, but what is the reason? Is it to show these gods in aerial vehicles, land here kind of a thing? Because we just don't have a good idea of why people would do this. And it really does seem that they're trying to signal people who are in the air, in space, or flying around our planet.
During World War II, American troops created air bases on remote Pacific islands. To natives who had never witnessed advanced technology, the sight of giant metal birds touching down looked to them as if the gods themselves had turned the Earth into a planetary pit stop.
They would see these big planes land, and it was all technology that just out of the sky. They didn't know how these things worked, but they could see them land. And what they liked about it was they were getting free stuff. They were getting cargo.